The sound echoed through the marble floors of Gangnam's most exclusive shopping center like a gunshot. Slap. Esther Kofimensu's head snapped to the side, her locks swinging with the force of the blow. Her shopping bags tumbled from her hands, spilling imported shea butter and African print fabrics across the pristine white floor. The metallic taste of blood bloomed in her mouth. "How dare you touch me with your filthy hands?" The woman standing before her was draped in Chanel from head to toe, her face twisted in disgust. "Don't you people know your place? Going around bumping into your betters, asking questions like you belong here." Esther's hand moved slowly to her cheek, her dark skin already blooming with heat. At 53, she'd weathered many storms, leaving Ghana at 25 with nothing but dreams, building her successful import-export business from the ground up, surviving heartbreak after heartbreak until she'd finally accepted that romantic love wasn't her destiny. But this public humiliation in the middle of the place she called home for nearly 3 decades? "I simply asked for directions to the homeware section," Esther said quietly, her accent a melodious blend of Ghanaian warmth and Korean precision. "I meant no offense." The woman, impossibly beautiful with porcelain skin and legs that seemed to go on forever, laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the growing crowd of onlookers. Several pulled out their phones. "No offense? You are the offense. Walking around here like you own the place. This is Korea. We have standards." The woman's name was Yoon Sarah, though Esther didn't know it yet. What Esther also didn't know was that 30 feet away, partially hidden behind a column near the Dior boutique, her son had witnessed everything. Cairo Kim Mensah had been following his mother for the past 40 minutes, a habit he developed over the years. At 28, he was Seoul's most feared underground kingpin, the man who controlled everything from the docks to the nightclubs, whose very name made grown men sweat. But to Esther, he would always be the terrified 9-year-old boy she'd found at the orphanage, the one who'd clung to her hand and whispered, "Are you really going to be my Iyama?" He'd promised himself he'd never let anyone hurt her. Never again. Cairo's hand tightened around the black card he'd been absently holding. His second-in-command, Dante, stood beside him, already recognizing the dangerous stillness that came over their boss before a storm. "Boss," Dante whispered, "that's Yoon Sarah, the model, the one from last week's." "I know exactly who she is," Cairo said, his voice dropping to a register that made Dante step back instinctively. 1 week ago, Sarah had orchestrated an accidental meeting at an exclusive restaurant. She'd played the role perfectly, demure, intelligent, laughing at his jokes, asking about his business ventures with wide, innocent eyes. Cairo had been not interested, exactly, but intrigued enough to accept when she'd suggested they meet again. He'd done his research, of course. Supermodel, brand ambassador for 3 major luxury houses, daughter of a former assemblyman and a renowned pianist. Clean record, pristine reputation. Apparently, he hadn't dug deep enough. The crowd around his mother was growing. Esther had bent to gather her scattered belongings, her movements careful and dignified despite the trembling in her hands. Sarah stood over her, still ranting, her voice growing shriller. "Look at you, crawling on the floor where you belong. Why don't you go back to whatever village you came from? Korea doesn't need more of your kind coming here. Taking our jobs, lowering our..." Cairo moved. He crossed the distance between them in seconds, his long coat billowing behind him. The crowd parted like water before a shark. Several people gasped they knew that face, that walk. The dragon of Itaewon, the ghost king of Seoul's underworld, the untouchable Cairo. Sarah's words died in her throat as she found herself face to face with the man she'd been obsessing over for months. Her expression transformed instantly: horror, then recognition, then a desperate, calculated sweetness. "Cairo, what a surprise. I was just..." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with enough force to make her wince. "You were just what?" His voice was conversational, almost pleasant. "That's what made it terrifying. Please, finish your sentence. You were just assaulting my mother in the middle of a shopping center? Is that what you were going to say?" The color drained from Sarah's face. Your mother? But I didn't... I mean, how was I supposed to know? How were you supposed to know that randomly assaulting black women in public might have consequences?" Cairo's smile didn't reach his eyes. Let me educate you. Esther had risen to her feet, her bags clutched to her chest. Kai, she said softly, using the nickname only she was allowed. Let it go. I'm fine. You're bleeding, Iyama. He didn't take his eyes off Sarah. Your lip is bleeding because this creature decided you weren't human enough to deserve basic respect. The endearment, Iyama, rippled through the crowd. Phones were definitely recording now. The son of the most powerful woman some of them had ever heard of, defending his black mother against one of Korea's darlings. This would be everywhere within the hour. Sarah's professional survival instincts kicked in. She dropped to her knees, her designer dress pooling around her. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Please, Cairo, I made a terrible mistake. I was stressed. I wasn't thinking. You weren't thinking when you struck my mother, Cairo said coldly. But you were thinking clearly enough to launch into a racist tirade. Interesting how that works. Esther stepped forward, placing a hand on her son's arm. Up close, Sarah could see the older woman properly for the first time. High cheekbones, skin like polished mahogany, eyes that held both pain and an unsettling amusement. She was wearing a simple but elegant outfit, clearly expensive if you knew what to look for, which Sarah did. This wasn't some random woman. This was someone who belonged here as much as anyone. Get up, child, Esther said, her voice carrying the particular tone of a woman who'd raised a stubborn boy into a powerful man. Groveling on the floor helps no one. It certainly doesn't undo what you've done. Sarah scrambled to her feet, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. Please, I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I'll apologize publicly. You'll come to my house, Esther interrupted, surprising everyone, including Cairo. For the next 2 weeks, every evening after your shoots and appearances, you'll come to my home. You'll help with chores. You'll sit at my table. You'll learn what you clearly were never taught. Iyama, Cairo said, warning in his voice. She doesn't deserve. This isn't about what she deserves. Esther's eyes were sharp as she studied Sarah. This is about what she needs. Look at her, Kai. Really look. Cairo didn't want to look at Sarah ever again, but he obeyed his mother. What he saw was a woman who'd probably never heard the word no in her life, who'd been told she was perfect so many times she'd started believing she was above consequences. A woman shaped by privilege into something brittle and hollow. 2 weeks, Esther repeated, speaking directly to Sarah now. You want forgiveness? You want my son to even consider speaking to you again? Then you'll show up at my door tomorrow at 7 p.m. I'll text you the address. You'll arrive on time, you'll do as you're told, and maybe you'll learn something about being a human being. Sarah nodded frantically, mascara running down her face. Yes, I'll be there. Thank you, Mrs. Kim Mensah. Thank you so much. It's Ms. Kofi Mensah, Esther corrected gently. Kim is my son's name. I kept my own. The crowd was still watching, still recording. Cairo's men had materialized from various corners of the mall, forming a protective circle. Dante approached with Esther's cleaned and repacked bags. Your car is ready, ma'am, Dante said, bowing respectfully to Esther. She'd fed him jollof rice when Cairo had first brought him around, had asked about his grandmother's health every time she saw him. All of Cairo's inner circle loved Esther. It made what they'd just witnessed even more enraging. As they walked toward the exit, Esther hooked her arm through Cairo's. You followed me again, she said, not quite a question. Always, Iyama. My overprotective boy. But she was smiling, leaning into him slightly. Though I suppose today I'm grateful for it. I should have moved faster. I should have stopped her before she touched you. The self-recrimination in his voice was clear. Kai, look at me. Esther stopped, turning to cup his face with both hands. Around them, his men pretended not to watch this moment of tenderness from the city's most dangerous man. You cannot protect me from everything. The world is what it is. But you can help me change it, one ignorant person at a time. That's what we're going to do with that girl. You really think she can change? I think everyone deserves the chance to try. Besides, Esther's smile turned mischievous, a glimpse of the humor that had helped her survive every hardship. I'm going to enjoy making her scrub my floors. These old knees don't bend like they used to. Cairo laughed despite himself, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You're a devious woman. I learned from the best," she shot back. "You think I raised Seoul's biggest troublemaker without developing some tactics of my own?" They walked out into the afternoon sun, leaving chaos and viral videos in their wake. Neither of them knew yet that this single incident would unravel secrets, test loyalties, and ultimately reveal truths about love, family, and the price of redemption. But Esther Kofi Mensah had faced down worse than a spoiled model with boundary issues. She'd crossed an ocean alone, built an empire with her bare hands, and raised a boy that society had thrown away into a man who commanded respect across the entire city. A little re-education project? That was just Tuesday. Sarah arrived at Esther's home at exactly 6:58 p.m. the next day, her hands shaking as she pressed the buzzer. The house wasn't what she'd expected. She'd imagined something ostentatious. Cairo could certainly afford it, but instead found herself facing a beautiful Hanok-style home that had been modernized while keeping its traditional bones. The courtyard was filled with plants, including what looked like a small vegetable garden. Warm light spilled from the windows, and she could smell something incredible cooking. The door opened, but it wasn't Esther. It was Cairo, dressed casually in black pants and a simple white shirt, looking nothing like the terrifying figure from yesterday and everything like the charming man who'd made her heart race at dinner last week. "You're early," he observed neutrally. "I didn't want to be late." Sarah had dressed carefully. Modest jeans, a simple blouse, her hair in a ponytail. No makeup beyond some lip balm. She was trying. "Kai, stop intimidating the girl and let her in," Esther's voice called from inside. "The stew will burn if I don't stir it." Cairo stepped aside wordlessly. Sarah entered, removing her shoes automatically and slipping into the guest slippers provided. The interior was warm, lived in, filled with an eclectic mix of Korean and African art. Photos covered one wall. A timeline of Cairo's life, from a solemn little boy holding Esther's hand to a teenager with his first motorcycle to the powerful man he'd become. In every photo where they appeared together, Esther's hand was on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, their foreheads pressed together in shared laughter. This was a home built on love. "In here," Esther called from the kitchen. Sarah found her at the stove, stirring a large pot of something that smelled like heaven and spices Sarah couldn't identify. She was wearing an apron over comfortable clothes, her locks tied back with a colorful scarf. "Good, you're on time. Wash your hands, soap is by the sink. Then you can start chopping vegetables. We're making groundnut soup and jollof rice tonight." I don't know how to cook," Sarah admitted quietly. Esther turned to look at her fully, and Sarah saw something shift in those dark eyes. Not judgment exactly, more like confirmation of a suspicion. "You're 26 years old and you don't know how to cook?" Esther asked. "My family always had staff, and now I have a meal service. My nutritionist plans everything." "I see." Esther wiped her hands on her apron. "And cleaning? Laundry? Basic life skills?" Sarah shook her head mutely. "Well then." Esther's smile was sharp but not unkind. "We have more work to do than I thought. Come here, child. Let me teach you something your mother should have." For the next hour, Esther walked Sarah through the basics of chopping vegetables. Onions, tomatoes, peppers. Sarah's eyes watered from the onions. Her cuts were uneven, and she nearly sliced her finger twice. Through it all, Esther corrected her with patience, adjusting her grip on the knife, showing her the proper technique. Cairo had disappeared to his room, giving them space, though Sarah could feel his presence in the house like a magnetic pull. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah finally asked as she struggled with a particularly stubborn sweet potato. "I was horrible to you. You should hate me." Esther was quiet for a moment, stirring the groundnut soup. "Do you know why I came to Korea, Sarah?" "No, ma'am. I came because I fell in love. Stupid, wild, head-over-heels love with a man I met at university in Ghana. He was here on a student exchange, and when he left, I followed him." Esther's voice was matter-of-fact, but Sarah heard the old pain underneath. "His family rejected me immediately. Too dark, too foreign, too different. He promised he didn't care, that we'd make it work. We tried for 3 years. What happened? He married someone else. Someone his family approved of. Someone Korean. Esther tasted the soup, added more pepper. I was heartbroken. Alone in a country where I barely spoke the language, where people stared at me everywhere I went. I could have left. Probably should have. But I was stubborn. I'd built a life here, started my business. Why should I run? Sarah kept chopping, listening. So I stayed. Built my company, made friends, created a home. But I was lonely. I wanted a family, wanted a child. Tried dating, disaster after disaster. Men who fetishized me. Men who wanted to hide me. Men who thought I should be grateful for any attention at all. Esther's laugh was dry. Sound familiar? Sarah flinched. Then one day, a friend suggested I visit an orphanage where she volunteered. And there was this little boy. So angry, so scared, so convinced he was unlovable. 9 years old and already certain the world had nothing good for him. Cairo, Sarah whispered. Cairo, Esther confirmed, her voice softening with a love so profound it made Sarah's chest ache. He'd been given up by his birth mother when he was 5, spent 4 years in the system, getting into fights, running away, breaking hearts including his own. No one wanted to adopt an older child, especially not one with behavioral issues, and certainly not with a black woman as a single parent. But you did. But I did. Best decision of my life. He was my son from the moment he grabbed my hand and asked if I was real. Esther turned to face Sarah fully. Do you know what he asked me that first night, after I'd taken him home? Sarah shook her head. He asked if I was going to send him back when he messed up. Not if he messed up. When? Because everyone always had. Esther's eyes glistened. So I told him the truth. I said, Kai, you can break every dish in this house. You can paint the walls purple. You can bring home every stray cat and soul. I will always be your Yama. That's what family means. We don't give up. The kitchen fell quiet except for the bubbling of the soup. You're wondering why I'm telling you this, Esther said, reading Sarah's expression. It's because I see that little boy in you. Not the anger, you have different demons. But that certainty that you don't have to try, don't have to grow, because either people will love you as you are or they're not worth your time. That's not. Sarah started to protest, then stopped. Wasn't it, though? Hadn't she coasted through life on her looks and family name, never having to work for anything, never facing real consequences? Your parents failed you, Esther continued, returning to her cooking. They gave you everything except the tools to be a good person. That's not entirely your fault. But what you do now, how you choose to grow from this, that's all you. I don't know how, Sarah admitted, tears starting to fall. I don't know how to be different. That's why you're here. Finish those vegetables, then you'll help me set the table. After dinner, you'll wash the dishes, I'll teach you how. Then tomorrow you'll come back and we'll do it again. And the day after that. Until you start understanding that being human isn't about being perfect or beautiful or powerful. It's about showing up, doing the work, and treating people with dignity even when no one's watching. The front door opened, and voices filled the hallway. Sarah recognized Dante's laugh, followed by others. Cairo's inner circle, she realized. The most dangerous men in Seoul, coming for dinner at his mother's house like a bunch of college students. Yama, we brought dessert, Dante called. That bakery you like in Hongdae. You spoil me, Esther called back, but she was smiling. Sarah, put those vegetables in the bowl and help me carry dishes to the table. My boys eat like wolves. We'll need everything. The dinner that followed was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. 8 people crammed around Esther's table. Cairo, Dante, and 5 other men whose names she struggled to remember. They ate with enthusiasm, praising Esther's cooking, arguing good-naturedly about football and business, treating her with a reverence that went beyond respect into something almost sacred. And they completely ignored Sarah. Not cruelly, they weren't rude. But they didn't include her in conversation, didn't ask her questions, didn't acknowledge her presence beyond basic politeness. To them, she was invisible, irrelevant. For a woman who'd spent her entire life being the center of attention, it was devastating. After dinner, true to her word, Esther taught Sarah how to wash dishes properly. The men had scattered to the living room, their voices carrying as they discussed business in careful euphemisms. Cairo had disappeared entirely. "He does that," Esther said, catching Sarah's searching glance. "When he's processing something, he needs space. Best to let him be." "He hates me now," Sarah said quietly, scrubbing a pot with more force than necessary. "He's disappointed. That's worse." Esther handed her another dish. "Cairo doesn't hate easily, but he doesn't forgive easily either, especially when it comes to me. You struck the one person in this world he would die for. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? I didn't think at all. That's the problem." Sarah's hands stilled in the soapy water. "I saw a black woman and I just reacted, like I'd been taught to react, like I'd seen my parents react. It was automatic. And that," Esther said firmly, "is exactly what we're going to break. Automatic prejudice, automatic cruelty, automatic assumption that you're better than someone because of how they look. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to resist. But if you truly want to change, you have to do the work." They finished the dishes in silence. When everything was clean and put away, Esther walked Sarah to the door. "Same time tomorrow," she said. "We'll work on laundry and meal planning." "Ms. Kofi Mensah," Sarah started, then paused. "Thank you for not just destroying me. You could have, Cairo could have, after what I did. What I said, you'd have been justified." "Destruction is easy," Esther replied. "Building something better that takes real strength. Let's see if you have it." After Sarah left, Esther found Cairo on the balcony of his old room, smoking a cigarette and staring out at the Seoul skyline. "You should quit those," she said, joining him. "You should let me handle Sarah my way," he countered. But there was no heat in it. "Which would be exile, professional destruction. Maybe have Dante arrange for her to find out exactly how unpleasant I can be when someone hurts my family." "Very measured and reasonable," Esther said dryly. She took the cigarette from his fingers and stubbed it out. "This is better. Trust me. She doesn't deserve your kindness. Probably not. But I'm not doing this for her, Kai. I'm doing it for you." Esther took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "You carry so much anger, my son. About your birth mother, about the system, about every person who looked at us and saw something wrong. If I let you tear apart everyone who shows prejudice, you'll spend your whole life destroying. I want better for you." Cairo was quiet for a long moment. "What if she doesn't change? What if this is all an act to get close to me? Then we'll know and we'll handle it. But I don't think it is. I think she's a spoiled girl who's never been challenged. The question is whether there's anything underneath the spoiling worth saving. And if there is, what then?" Esther smiled, knowing what he was really asking. "Then she'll be a better person who learned an important lesson. That doesn't mean you have to date her, Kai. You don't owe her romance because she managed to become a decent human being. That's a separate question entirely." "Good, because I meant what I said. I don't want her." But Esther heard the tiny thread of uncertainty in his voice and kept her knowing smile to herself. The next 2 weeks would be illuminating for everyone involved. By the end of the first week, Sarah had learned to cook 3 dishes, properly clean a bathroom, and operate a washing machine. She'd also learned that Esther was funny, wickedly, devastatingly funny, with a talent for gentle mockery that left Sarah laughing at herself. "No, no, child," Esther said, watching Sarah attempt to fold fitted sheets. "You're treating it like it's personally attacking you. Be gentle but firm. Like disciplining Cairo when he was 13 and thought he was too cool for school." "Did that happen often?" Sarah asked, grateful for any glimpse into Cairo's past. "Every other week between ages 13 and 16. That boy tested every boundary I set." Esther demonstrated the folding technique. "One time he came home with a tattoo. 14. I made him sit through a 3-hour lecture on respecting his body and then took him to get it properly covered with something meaningful instead of whatever symbol his friends thought was cool." "What did he get?" Esther's smile turned soft. "My name, in a canned script, the language of my people, right over his heart. Said if he was going to mark himself permanently, it should be with the only thing that was actually permanent in his life." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. This love between them, this bond, it was everything her own family had never been. My parents never even knew what I was doing half the time, she admitted, struggling with the sheet. They were always traveling, always at events. I was raised by nannies and tutors who were paid to agree with me. The first time I ever heard the word no was from a director when I was 19. I threw such a tantrum they almost dropped me from the campaign. What changed? My agent threatened to quit. She was the only person who'd been honest with me, and I was terrified of losing her. So I behaved. But I never really learned. I just got better at hiding the tantrums. Esther took the sheet from her and folded it properly, then unfolded it, and handed it back. Again, practice makes progress. That evening, Dante arrived early for dinner with news. Sarah had just finished setting the table when he burst in, his expression troubled. "Boss, we have a problem. Your birth mother contacted Minjun. She's asking to meet with you." The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Sarah watched Cairo's face transform from relaxed to absolutely glacial. "No," he said simply. "She says it's urgent. Something about your birth father being sick, wanting to make amends before." I said no. Cairo's voice could have cut glass. "I don't have a birth mother. I have Yama. That woman gave up any claim to me when she left me at that orphanage with nothing but a note saying I was too difficult to handle." Esther appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. She'd obviously heard everything. "Kai, don't." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Don't ask me to forgive her. Don't tell me she was young or scared or desperate. I was 5 years old and she threw me away." "I wasn't going to say any of that," Esther said calmly. "I was going to say that running from this won't make it hurt less. It'll just mean you're running and hurting instead of standing still and hurting. I don't want to see her." "Then don't. But at least read what she has to say. Knowledge is power, my son. Even painful knowledge." The standoff lasted several beats before Cairo nodded sharply and stalked out of the room. Dante followed, leaving Sarah alone with Esther. "Is he okay?" Sarah asked quietly. "No, but he will be." Esther returned to the kitchen, but Sarah noticed her hands were shaking slightly as she stirred the pot. "Some wounds never fully heal. We just learn to live with the scars." Over the following days, Sarah noticed changes in the household dynamic. Cairo was darker, more withdrawn. He snapped at his men, threw himself into work with frightening intensity, and barely ate at dinner. Esther watched him with worried eyes but gave him space, understanding that her son needed to process in his own way. On Sarah's 10th night, she arrived to find the house in chaos. Raised voices came from inside, Cairo and Esther actually arguing. "You can't ask me to do this." Cairo's voice, raw with pain. "I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm asking you to hear her out, so you can stop carrying this question around for the rest of your life." Sarah hesitated on the doorstep. Dante appeared beside her, looking grim. "Come on," he said. "They need privacy. I'll buy you coffee and explain some things you should know." At the cafe, Dante laid out the truth Sarah had only glimpsed in pieces. How Cairo's birth mother, Yoon Ji-won, had been 17 when she'd had him with a man she refused to name. How she'd struggled for 5 years before leaving him at the orphanage. How she'd gone on to marry well, have 3 other children, build a respectable life. All while Cairo suffered in the system. "He's Seoul's most powerful underground figure," Dante said, stirring his coffee. "But he started as a kid no one wanted. You know why he's so protective of Iyama?" Sarah shook her head. "Because when he was 11, some parents at his school found out she'd adopted him. They started a petition to have him removed, saying it was inappropriate for a black single woman to raise a Korean child. They made his life hell. Made her life hell." Dante's expression hardened. Cairo put 3 of their kids in the hospital. Was expelled. And you know what Iyama did? What? Threw him a party. Told him she was proud he'd defended their family, even if the method needed work. Then she enrolled him in a different school and dared anyone to say something. That's when he decided that anyone who disrespected her would pay. And he's never broken that promise. The weight of what Sarah had done, striking Esther, insulting her publicly, hit her with fresh horror. She'd assaulted the most protected woman in Seoul not because of Cairo's power, but because she'd earned the fierce love of a man who'd been thrown away by everyone else. "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah asked. "Because in 3 days your 2 weeks are up, and you need to decide what kind of person you're going to be when you walk out of Yama's house. Are you going to take these lessons and actually change? Or are you going to go back to your old life and pretend this was just a weird blip?" Before Sarah could answer, Dante's phone buzzed. His face went pale as he read the message. "We need to go. Now." They rushed back to find ambulance lights flashing outside Esther's house. Sarah's heart stopped. Inside, they found Esther sitting on the couch, looking annoyed while a paramedic checked her blood pressure. Cairo was pacing like a caged tiger, and the living room showed signs of a scuffle. Overturned furniture, broken glass. "What happened?" Dante demanded. "Yoon Ji-won happened," Esther said dryly. "Decided to show up uninvited with her husband, demanding to see Cairo. When I told them to leave, her husband got aggressive. Tried to push past me. He grabbed her," Cairo corrected, his voice deadly quiet. "Put his hands on my mother. So I broke his wrist and 3 ribs before the police arrived." Sarah looked around properly now and spotted them. A woman about Esther's age, beautifully dressed but with tears streaming down her face, and a man in an expensive suit being treated by another paramedic, his wrist at an unnatural angle. "Kai!" the woman sobbed. "Please, I just wanted to talk to you. I wanted to explain. You wanted to ease your conscience?" Cairo cut her off. "You wanted forgiveness so you can tell yourself you're not the woman who abandoned her 5-year-old son because he was inconvenient. Well, you're not getting it. I was 17. I was scared. Your father..." Ji-won gestured at her husband. "He was married to someone else when we met. I was a child myself, pregnant and alone. What was I supposed to do? Literally anything except leave a little boy in an orphanage with abandonment issues that would take years of therapy to even begin to address." Cairo shot back. "Anything except build a perfect life with a perfect family, while I convinced myself I was unlovable garbage." "You're not garbage," Ji-won whispered. "You never were. I was wrong, I was cowardly, I made terrible choices. But I want to make it right. I want to know my son." The room fell silent except for the crackle of police radios outside. Esther stood slowly, waving off the paramedic. She walked to where Ji-won sat and looked down at her with an expression Sarah couldn't quite read. "You don't get to know him," Esther said quietly. "That privilege is reserved for people who showed up, who did the work, who loved him when he was difficult and angry and convinced the world hated him." She paused. "But he deserves to know why. Not your excuses, not your justifications. The truth, whatever it is." She turned to Cairo. 5 minutes. Hear her truth. Then she leaves and you can decide if you ever want contact again. But this question mark hanging over your life, it needs to end. The 5 minutes turned into 20. Sarah, Dante, and the others waited outside with Esther while Cairo listened to his birth mother finally explain. The husband, his birth father apparently, had been a married assemblyman carrying on an affair with a teenager. When Ji-won got pregnant, he'd panicked and cut her off. She tried to raise Cairo alone but had been disowned by her family, struggled with poverty and depression. When the assemblyman's wife died and he'd come back into her life offering marriage and legitimacy, she'd convinced herself that Cairo would be better off in the system than in their shameful secret. She was wrong, Esther said flatly when Ji-won finally left, looking shattered. She was selfish and cowardly, but at least now he knows. Cairo emerged looking exhausted but somehow lighter. I don't forgive her. Maybe I never will, but knowing why, it helps. A little. Esther pulled him into a hug, and Sarah watched this complicated, dangerous man melt into his mother's arms like a child seeking comfort. You were never unwanted, Esther murmured. Not by me. Never by me. I know, Yama. I know. The next evening was Sarah's last mandatory visit. She'd learned more in 2 weeks than in 26 years of life. How to cook, clean, think about others. But more importantly, she'd learned about real love, real family, real strength. She arrived with flowers, not expensive roses, but bright African daisies she'd found at a market Esther had mentioned. For your garden, Sarah said, presenting them. I wanted to give you something that would last. Esther's smile was warm. You've done well, child. I'm proud of the work you've put in. I want to keep coming, Sarah blurted out. Not because I have to, because I want to. Once a week, maybe, to learn more recipes, to talk, to... She trailed off, uncertain how to articulate this feeling of having found something she'd been missing her whole life. You want family, Esther said gently. Real family, who sees you for who you are and loves you anyway. Yes, Sarah whispered. Then you're welcome here, as long as you continue growing. As long as you're genuine. That night, Cairo joined them for dinner, the first time in days. He looked at Sarah properly for the first time since the mall incident. You're different, he observed. I'm trying to be better, she corrected. It's going to take more than 2 weeks to undo 26 years of being terrible. Honesty, that's new. Your mother taught me that lies only protect the ego, not the soul. Cairo's lips quirked. She does have a way with words. They ate Esther's fish stew, and conversation flowed more easily than Sarah had expected. But there was no romance in the air, no second chances at the date they'd once had. That ship had sailed, and Sarah found herself surprisingly okay with it. What she'd found here was more valuable than romance. She'd found a mirror that showed her who she really was, and a guide willing to help her become someone better. After dinner, Sarah helped clean up one last time. He'll never date me, will he? She asked Esther quietly. Probably not, Esther confirmed. You hurt me, which means you hurt him. That's not something he'll get past easily, if ever. I don't blame him. I wouldn't either, in his place. But that doesn't mean you can't find love elsewhere, Esther continued. Real love. With someone who sees this new person you're building and values her. Someone you don't have to pretend for. How will I know when I find it? Esther smiled, thinking of her son. You'll know because they'll make you want to be better. Not because you're afraid of losing them, but because their love makes you brave enough to face your own flaws. That's real love. Everything else is just habit. 3 months later, Sarah stood on stage accepting an award for her new campaign. One that featured models of every shade and background, that celebrated diversity in ways Korean fashion had rarely seen. In the audience sat Esther, beaming with pride. Cairo hadn't come. He rarely attended public events if he could help it. But he'd sent flowers, sunflowers, Sarah's new favorites, which Esther had taught her to grow in her apartment's small balcony garden. The card read, Proud of your growth. Keep going. K. It wasn't love. It wasn't romance. But it was acknowledgement from the man whose respect she'd lost and worked hard to earn back, even knowing she'd never have it completely. And that, Sarah thought as she gave her speech about second chances and the people who give them to us, was enough. After the ceremony, Esther met her for coffee. You look happy, Esther observed. I am. Is that weird? I lost my chance with your son. My parents are barely speaking to me because I called them out on their racism. Half my old friends think I've gone crazy. But I'm happy. That's not weird at all. That's growth. Esther squeezed her hand. You're building something real now. A life based on who you actually are, not who everyone told you to be. That's terrifying and exhilarating. I met someone, Sarah admitted shyly. A photographer. He's not rich, not famous. But he listens when I talk, and he challenges me when I'm being selfish, and he makes me laugh. Then I'm happy for you. Would you meet him? I value your opinion. Of course. Bring him to dinner this Sunday. I'm making jollof rice. Later, Sarah would bring her photographer to Esther's house, where he'd charm everyone with his humility and make Esther laugh with his terrible Korean puns. Cairo would shake his hand and tell him quietly that if he ever made Sarah cry, he'd regret it. But it would be said with a tiny smile that suggested maybe, possibly, he was starting to forgive. But in that moment, sitting in the cafe with the woman who'd shown her what real strength looked like, Sarah felt something she'd never experienced before. She felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, becoming exactly who she was meant to become. And Esther, watching this young woman who'd traveled from cruelty to compassion, felt the same satisfaction she'd felt watching Cairo grow from an angry, scared boy into a powerful man who protected the people he loved. Some people are born into families. Others build them from scratch, piece by careful piece, choosing love over biology, effort over ease. Esther Kofi Mensah had built herself an empire of a different kind. Not money or power, but a collection of souls she'd helped repair, including her son's and now, perhaps, Sarah's too. It was more than enough. It was everything. 5 years later, the garden behind Esther's house had grown wild and beautiful, much like the family that gathered in it. Yama, Uncle Kai said a bad word. The accusation came from a small voice filled with righteous indignation. Esther looked up from the plantain she was frying to see her grandson, because that's what 4-year-old Zion was, biology be damned. Pointing an accusing finger at Cairo, who was attempting to assemble a complicated playset and clearly losing the battle. Did he now? Esther called back, fighting a smile. What word was that? He said the S word. Zion whispered dramatically, his eyes wide. He had his mother's porcelain skin and his father's kind eyes, and absolutely everyone's capacity for dramatic flair. Kai, Esther said warningly. It slipped? Cairo defended himself, looking sheepish in a way only Esther could make him. At 33, he was even more formidable than before. Silver threads now streaked his dark hair, and his reputation had grown to legendary status. But right now, he was just a man being scolded by his mother while a 4-year-old watched with satisfaction. Uncle Kai has to put money in the swear jar, Zion announced smugly. Uncle Kai is building you an entire climbing structure in the heat, Cairo countered. I think that earns me one S word. Nope, rules are rules. You said so. Dante, lounging in a chair with a beer, laughed so hard he nearly choked. The kids got you there, boss. I'm going to remember this when you need a favor, Cairo muttered. But he was already pulling out his wallet and handing Zion a bill for the jar they kept on Esther's counter. The money went to the children's charity Esther had founded 3 years ago, because of course she had. The back gate opened, and Sarah entered carrying a massive tray of desserts. Her photographer husband Minho right behind her with their 1-year-old daughter, Amara, balanced on his hip. Sorry we're late. Someone decided nap time was optional today. Sarah had cut her hair into a natural bob that framed her face beautifully, and she wore minimal makeup. 5 years of Esther's influence had transformed her from a woman who hid behind beauty into one who wielded it as just one tool among many. Auntie Sarah. Zion abandoned his vigil over Cairo's swearing to race toward her. Did you bring the chocolate ones? Would I forget? Sarah ruffled his hair affectionately, then paused to hug Esther properly. Something smells amazing. Jollof rice, kelaweel, grilled tilapia, and I'm trying a new groundnut soup recipe. You'll tell me if it needs adjusting. Everything you make is perfect, Sarah said loyally, then caught Esther's look. But yes, I'll give you honest feedback. I learned from the best. Minho had gravitated toward Cairo, as he always did. The two men had developed an unlikely friendship. The underground king and the quiet artist who'd somehow won over the girl everyone thought Cairo should have wanted. Need help with that? Minho asked, eyeing the playset instructions. Unless you read Swedish, we're both useless. Cairo wiped sweat from his forehead. Why did Iyama buy something that requires engineering degrees to assemble? Because my grandson deserves the best, and you said you could handle it? Esther called from the kitchen window. I'm being set up for failure, Cairo announced to no one in particular. The truth was, the playset had been Cairo's idea, purchased anonymously and delivered to Esther's house with a note that said for Zion, from someone who wishes he'd had this as a child. Esther had seen through it immediately but played along, knowing her son still sometimes struggled with direct expressions of affection for anyone but her. More guests arrived as the afternoon wore on. Dante brought his girlfriend, a lawyer who somehow found his dangerous lifestyle romantic. 3 more of Cairo's inner circle showed up with their families. Over the years, Esther's Sunday dinners had become mandatory. Attendance for anyone in Cairo's organization. She'd become the unofficial grandmother to a dozen children whose parents controlled Seoul's underworld. It was absurd. It was perfect. It was family. Iyama, can you tell the story? Zion asked during dinner, wedged between Sarah and Esther at the long table they'd set up outside. About when you and Uncle Kai first met? Esther glanced at Cairo, who shrugged, his way of saying he didn't mind. Well, Esther began, and the table quieted. Even the adults loved this story. I walked into an orphanage one spring day, not sure what I was looking for, and there was this boy, sitting alone in a corner, glaring at everyone like they were all his enemies. "That's Uncle Kai?" Zion's eyes went wide. "That's your Uncle Kai." So I sat down next to him, and do you know what he said to me? "What?" He said, "You're going to leave like everyone else. You should just go now." Esther's voice softened with memory. So I told him I'd just gotten there and wasn't going anywhere until I'd at least had some juice. We sat there for 2 hours, not talking, just existing together. And when I got up to leave, he grabbed my hand. Cairo was looking down at his plate, but Sarah noticed his jaw was tight with emotion. "He asked if I was real," Esther continued, "if I would come back. So I promised I would. And I did. Every day for 2 weeks until the paperwork went through and I could bring him home. And then you were a family," Zion concluded, satisfied with the ending he'd heard a dozen times. "Then we were a family," Esther confirmed. "The best family I could have asked for." After dinner, as the adults lingered over drinks and the children played, Sarah found herself alone with Cairo for the first time in months. He'd been traveling, expanding operations into new territories, becoming more myth than man to most of Seoul. "You're good with Zion," he observed, watching her son chase fireflies with Amara toddling after him. "He's easy to love. Like his uncle." She paused. "I never thanked you properly. For the flowers at my wedding. For accepting Minho. For not making it weird. You became a better person. That was always the goal." Cairo sipped his whiskey. "Though I'll admit I didn't think you'd actually do it. Most people don't change. Most people don't have your mother as a teacher." Sarah looked toward the kitchen where Esther was holding court, telling some story that had everyone laughing. "She saved my life, Kai. Not from you, but from myself. She has a habit of doing that." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked quietly. "Choosing this life? The violence, the danger?" Cairo considered the question seriously. "I regret the necessity of it. But I don't regret protecting what's mine. This city tried to crush me, tried to crush her. Now we're the ones who decide who gets crushed." He glanced at her. "Does that make me a monster?" "It makes you human. Flawed, complicated, but human." Sarah smiled. "Your mother taught me that too. Nobody's just one thing." Later, after the guests had left and the dishes were done, Esther found Cairo sitting on her porch, smoking despite her protests. "Those will kill you," she said, settling into the chair beside him. "So will a dozen other things in my line of work. At least this one tastes good. Charming." But she didn't push it. Pick your battles had always been her parenting philosophy. Zion loved the playset. "It's not from me." "Of course not. Just like the new roof wasn't from you, and the car wasn't from you, and the fully funded scholarship program for adoptive single parents isn't from you." Cairo's lips twitched. "Anonymous donations. Could be anyone. My mysterious benefactor who happens to have the same handwriting as my son." They sat together, watching fireflies dance in the garden Esther had built from nothing, just like she'd built everything else in her life. "I got a call today," Cairo said. "Eventually. G1. She's sick. Cancer. She wanted to see me before." "You know?" Esther waited, letting him process. "I told her no." He took a drag of his cigarette. "Does that make me cruel?" "It makes you someone with boundaries. You don't owe her your pain, Kai. You've done the work to move past what she did. Reopening that wound won't help anyone. What if I regret it later?" "Then you'll regret it. But you'll regret it as a man who protected his peace. Not as a boy still begging for scraps of love from people who abandoned him." Esther took his free hand. "You are allowed to choose yourself, my son. I spent your whole childhood teaching you that you mattered. Don't forget the lesson now." Cairo stubbed out the cigarette and pulled her into a hug. This fierce, dangerous man holding on to his mother like she was the only real thing in a world of shadows. "I love you, Iyama," he said quietly. "Everything I am, everything good in me. It's because of you. You always were a sweet talker." But Esther's eyes were wet. "I love you too, Kai. My greatest adventure. My best decision. My son." They stayed like that until the stars came out fully, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built something unbreakable. Inside the house, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her mother, the first in 6 months. I saw your interview about diversity in fashion. You were right. I was wrong. Can we talk? Sarah looked at the message for a long moment, thinking about grace, about second chances, about the long road from cruelty to compassion. She thought about Esther, who'd given her those chances when she didn't deserve them. She typed back, Sunday dinner, 5 p.m. Bring Dad. My second mom wants to meet you both. Because that's what Esther had become. Not a replacement for the parents who'd failed her, but an addition. The mother who taught her what maternal love actually looked like. In her bedroom, Esther's phone glowed with a message from the adoption agency. Another single woman inquiring about older children, scared and hopeful in equal measure. Esther smiled and began typing her response, ready to share the wisdom she'd earned through decades of loving fiercely and refusing to give up. The road won't be easy, she wrote, but the best things never are. If you're ready to do the work, to love without conditions, to show up even when it's hard, then you're ready to be someone's whole world. Just like they'll become yours. She hit send and looked at the photo on her nightstand. Her and Cairo at his high school graduation. Both of them grinning despite the principal's obvious disapproval of her presence. They'd faced down the world together and won. Now she got to help others do the same. Outside, Seoul glittered with possibility. In this house, in this garden, in this family built from choice rather than blood, love had won. It always did when you fought hard enough for it. And Esther Kofi Mensah had never known how to do anything but fight.
Hello besties, in this story we learned that family isn't found in blood, it's built through unconditional love, accountability, and the courage to grow. Besties, true strength lies in transformation, not perfection. Sarah's journey shows that acknowledging our flaws and doing the hard work to change is more powerful than maintaining a flawless image. Besties, love isn't about finding perfect people, it's about choosing imperfect people and helping each other become better every single day. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe and share.